Hello, my name is Dominika Stanek. I am a self-regulation coach, a mindfulness instructor, a teacher and a mother. Today I would like to present to you the idea of self-regulation and its techniques. Self-regulation appeared in my life shortly after the birth of my little daughter, who was a very demanding child. And it was the time where there was a need in my life for the self-regulation method which helped me to regain control over my emotions. The creator of self-regulation method is Stuart Shanker, a Canadian professor of philosophy and psychology, who is the founder of Self-Regulation Institute and the Merit Center in Canada. He is also the author of widely known bestseller manuals Self-Reg and Self-Regulation at School. These books show parents and teachers self-regulation techniques to help them manage their own emotions as well as the emotions of the children. So what in fact is self-regulation? Stuart Shanker has found over 400 definitions of self-regulation. Self-regulation refers to how we respond to stress and how we manage it. Sometimes the way we or our kids feel stress is problematic, and if we fall into bad habits, these can have bad results farther down the track. Actually, we all self-regulate, though sometimes in ways that are maladaptive. For example, that don't help us recover from stress and lead to even greater stress afterwards. Self-regulation refers to the way an individual deals with stress in all its many forms and then recovers from the energy expended. The concepts of self-regulation and self-control are also often described as interchangeable. However, this is not the correct because these are different mechanisms. So, what is actually the difference between the self-regulation and self-control? Self-control and self-regulation are not the same. Self-control is about inhibiting troublesome impulses, whereas self-regulation is about understanding, not monitoring, and not managing emotions, thoughts and behavior in ourselves and others. In fact, effective self-regulation reduces the stress-induced feelings that cause impulses. So, if we say to a child, calm down or don't cry, is this the self-regulation or self-control? Well, this is a typical example of self-control strategy. If we ask the children to calm down and restrain emotions, it is not helping them to understand and manage them now or in the future. When self-control takes over the body, a vicious circle of stress occurs. If we compare our body to a car, our mental resilience will be our car's braking system. To make it work, well, you need to take care of it first. It is difficult to brake effectively when there is no brake fluid or some parts are broken. If we brake too often and too aggressively, our brakes will quickly wear out, which will ultimately lead to an accident. In this metaphor, self-control can be called the process of inhibition, whereas self-regulation means proper servicing of our car. We can also see our energy level as our fuel, which is always limited. Its sources need to be replenished. So if we don't take care of our nervous system, stress gains control over it. That is why self-regulation is so important in our lives, starting from early years, especially while working with little children in kindergarten. Kindergarten marks a major transition in children's lives, from being cuddle infants to being treated as responsible individuals. The early years are the time of extraordinary growth and development. Children's capacity for self-regulations, how they manage energy expenditure in response to stressors, and then recover from the effort is wired during these critical years. The author of Self-Reg Method, Stuart Shanker, says, "I have seen hundreds of children and their parents in my professional capacity and have never once seen a bad kid. Every single child, when met with understanding and patience, can be guided along the trajectory that leads to a rich and meaningful life." So, there are three things Shanker hopes every carer will keep in mind. There is no such a thing as a bad kid. There is no such a thing as a kid who cannot learn the self-regulation in a manner that promotes growth in all its complex aspects. There is no such a thing as a trajectory that cannot be changed. All worrying trajectories can be changed if only we have the right tools. When someone is emotionally dysregulated, they are not capable of deliberately choosing their actions or aware in a rational way of what they are doing. One of the most worrying trends we are seeing in children today is a sharp decline in their resilience. Unable to cope with adversity of the fear of failure, they are avoiding challenges altogether, seeking safety in withdrawal. But growth, in all its many forms, demands engaging with stress rather than fleeing from it, and that requires resilience. Self-Reg is a pathway to enhancing resilience, motivation, learning, and well-being. If you have tried everything as an educator, parent, or a service provider to support children, teens, and their families, Self-Reg can help. Learn how to read, reframe, and respond. Self-Reg redefines difficult child's behavior as stress behavior. They attempt to identify and reduce stressors while teaching the child skills to respond to stressors. Some people see a difficult child's behavior as a misbehavior, and they would rather use reward and punishment to control the child's behavior. But these do not address the underlying reasons for the behavior. When a child misbehaves, always ask yourself two questions: why and why now? And then look for stressors that may be causing this particular behavior. Where these stressors come from? Shanker Self-Reg looks at stress across 5 domains of experience: biological, emotion, cognitive, social, and prosocial. Stressors are all stimuli that disturb our internal balance and put us in a state of excessive nervous stimulation. So the first domain of stressors that Shanker recognizes is a biological domain. It includes psychological factors like health, nutrition, sensory issues, illness, tiredness. The second domain is emotional domain. Stressors in the emotional domain often interact with and multiply stressors in the other 4 domains of Self-Reg. The third domain is cognitive domain, and this includes stress related to thinking, concentration, attention, perseverance, and many others. The fourth is social domain. This includes issues related with social interactions, relationships, contacts with friends, and so on. And the last one is a pro-social domain, including stressors around moral judgments, the behavior, empathy, and other people's stress. What is more here, stressors can interact with each other. Stress from one domain can multiply stress in another domain. This is really important to remember about that. For example, if we are already stressed emotionally, excessive noise will be really much more stressful. And if we are exhausted, we will be more likely to get frustrated by a cognitive challenging task or stressed out by an annoying person. The multiplying effect of stressors causes stress cycles where we are in a constant state of higher arousal that is very draining and very hard to break out because our nervous system is stuck in the overdrive. So, how can we take care of ourselves using the self-regulation method? What tools does the self-reg method give us? This method is based on 5 simple steps. The first step we have to make is to read the signs of stress and reframe our behavior in the context of stress. To regain balance, we must first realize that our nervous system is disturbed because, for example, we feel a strange tightness in the stomach, our hands are hot and sweaty, or our breathing speeds up. These are well-known signals through which our body informs us that it needs our attention. Once we know that our body experiences a stress, we can consider where the source of this stress is and therefore what our stressors are. Is it a hunger, or maybe lack of sleep, or fear of an important exam or meeting? Identification of stressors and their source is the second step of the self-regulation method. Once we have identified our stressors, we can move on to the third step, which is reducing them. For example, if we feel stressed before an important meeting, we can do a series of relaxing breathing exercises. If we are hungry, we can, of course, eat something. And if we are hot, we can drink something cool or open the window. And these are some short-term stressors reducing strategies. The most obvious ones, and in fact, most common. However, the next fourth step of self-regulation method is the moment when we move on to reflection and drawing conclusions that will support us in the future and help avoid stress in a given areas or allow them to be significantly minimized. For example, if I know my body and I know that I need to have lunch around 1 p.m., I plan the break between classes so that I can have a break for a meal at that time precisely. I do not make any appointments with anyone during this break. I just book this time for my lunch because I know that if I don't have this, I will be irritated and it will be difficult for me to concentrate and work. Biological stressors are the ones that are at least seemingly easy to take care of. Therefore, I can prepare a bottle of water in advance if I know that I need a drink during the lesson. I can also dress appropriately for my classes so that I am not too hot during. Theoretically, if I know that I am going to have a really hard day ahead of me, I can plan a longer night's rest to be rested during that day and have more energy that I would need. And of course, these are minor changes in our daily routine, but they are also very important. However, the most important strategies are the long-term ones, and they help you to build your resilience and well-being in the long run. And this is where we move on to the fifth step of self-regulation, which is the regeneration strategy. So, what to do to regenerate effectively and increase our mental resilience? The self-reg method recommends here the mindfulness exercises. When practiced regularly, they can significantly increase your resilience. You will notice the effects of regular exercises within a couple of weeks. Similar effects are achieved by practicing meditation or breathing exercises, which are also shown in our program. And here again, we have a short-term and a long-term regeneration strategies. But be careful here. Some short-term regeneration strategies can be harmful for you in the long run. For example, if you reduce your tension by eating chocolate or having a cup of coffee or a glass of wine just once a time, it may work for you. but repeated over a long period of time, it will obviously develop a harmful habits. If you manage to practice these 5 steps of self-regulation, after some time you will be able to manage stress much more easily, minimize stressors, and regenerate effectively. At this point, we have to also say about a very important thing, which is a co-regulation. In self-reg, co-regulation means what happens when a caregiver regulates a child's or other person's behavior and feelings through interactive bi-directional signals, adjusting their tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and gestures, and soothing words. Co-regulation is a process in which 2 people adapt their behavior and help each other to achieve an optimal state of regulation. If a teacher is calm and regulated, his internal state is also reflected in the children. However, if he or she is overloaded and overstimulated, this is reflected also in children's behavior. Children can only learn to self-regulate when they have their repeated experience of being co-regulated by caring adults. This does not mean trying to control children's feelings or telling them to calm down. It means co-regulation, helping them feel calm and safe. Co-regulation is especially important with children, but in fact, we co-regulate with others throughout our lives. The ultimate long-term self-reg goal is to help children acquire the necessary understanding of when and how to manage their own energy and tension, so they can adapt to various stresses of life. But self-reg is also personal. If we are going to support our children's self-regulation, first we have to understand our own stress and know how to manage our own energy and tension. Therefore, by taking care of ourselves and our well-being, we also indirectly influence our environment, making our relationships with it more harmonious. And to make self-reg strategy work, we have to practice it regularly over a longer period of time. Now I would like to present to you some activities for teachers that can help them to build their resilience and well-being. So the first activity I would present to you is called stress signals, and it will help us to recognize stress signals. We all encounter stress nearly every day. However, we may experience it in a different way. Therefore, it is important for everyone to recognize their own stress signals. Recognizing stress signals at an early stage will make it easier for you to react before your stress level gets really high. And this exercise will help you to recognize stress signals in your body as well as to divide them according to their source. First, let's read the example and later try to do a similar exercise with your own case. So, this is our example case. Yesterday I had just a tough day. I could not sleep well the night before as my little child was sick. When I finally woke up in the morning, I realized I did not hear my alarm clock, so I overslept. It was really late for work and I had an important meeting that I had to attend. So I left home as quickly as possible, even without having my breakfast, and drove fast to work. Of course, I arrived too late. My boss was really angry with me and I felt guilty, as I really wanted to help my team with the presentation during the meeting. But I was so sleepy and tired that I could not even understand what they were talking about. I felt so guilty. I felt like I disappointed my boss, my team, and myself. All day long I had a terrible headache. On my way back home, I was a witness of a car accident. I saw a woman crossing a street who was hit by a car. I helped her, of course, and I called an ambulance, but I felt like all my body was shaking. Finally, I arrived home really late, really hungry, tired and irritated. When I entered my home, I could see the chaos and mess around. I suddenly got really angry with my children and my husband and started shouting at them. So in that case, we need to find stress signals. Where can we see them? From what domains do they come from? As you know, we have 5 stress domains in self-regulation theory: the biological, the emotional, cognitive, social, and prosocial. So, where are the biological stress signals? I felt sleepy, I felt hungry nearly all day long, and I also had a terrible headache. And where are the emotional signals of stress? I felt guilty, angry, and irritated. These are emotions showing me stress. And what were the cognitive stress signals? I could not understand my friends and my boss during the meeting. And what were the social stress signals? I had the feeling that everyone at work, at home, I had the feeling that everyone at work and at home was angry at me. And what were the prosocial stress signals? I was the witness of the car accident. It made my body shaking. Now, I would like you to think of any recent situation in which you felt really irritated and tense. Try to remember as many details as you can. For example, what was the place where you were in? What it looked like? What were you wearing? What sensations did you feel in your body? Think about all the emotions you felt at the very moment. Try to recall, what did you think about other people? Do you remember your thoughts and whether you were focused or distracted in this situation? Take a moment to remember this situation as clearly as possible. And now, make a detailed description of this situation. After you do that, try to answer the following questions. What were your stress signals? How did you know that you experienced a high level of tension? What were your biological level stress signals? What were your emotional level stress signals? What emotions were coming up and letting you know that you were experiencing a high level of tension? What were your cognitive stress signals? How did your brain function? And how did you know when you feel a high level of tension? What were your social stress signals? How did you see other people's behavior? What were your thoughts about others, their intentions and their feelings? And what were your prosocial signals of stress? How did you react to other people's problems? How did it make you feel? In the previous exercise, we have identified the individual stress signals. And now it is time to learn more about stressors themselves and the areas they come from. It is important to remember that each of us can experience the effects of stress in a different way. For some people, hunger may be a strong stressor, and at the same time, there are people who can fast for 10 or 12 hours, and such a break between eating will not cause them any tension. That is why it is important to recognize the stressors that lead to high tension from an individual point of view. So now, let's try to identify and categorize stressors in the following case. Yesterday I had just a tough day. I could not sleep well the night before as my little child was sick. When I finally woke up in the morning, I realized I did not hear my alarm clock. So I overslept. It was really late for work and I had an important meeting that I had to attend. So I left home as quickly as possible, even without having my breakfast, and drove fast to work. Of course, I arrived too late. My boss was really angry with me and I felt guilty, as I really wanted to help my team with the presentation during the meeting. But I was so sleepy and tired that I could not even understand what they were talking about. I felt so guilty. I felt like I disappointed my boss, my team, and myself. All day long, I had a terrible headache. On my way back home, I was a witness of a car accident. I saw a woman crossing a street who was hit by a car. I helped her, of course, and I called an ambulance, but I felt like all my body was shaking. Finally, I arrived home really late, really hungry, tired and irritated. When I entered my home, I could see the chaos and mess around. I suddenly got really angry with my children and my husband and started shouting at them. What stressors can you recognize in the above example? Which domain did they come from? Stressors from the biological domain we can find here. For example, I was sleepy and hungry. I had a headache. Stressors from the emotional domain. I was afraid of my boss's reaction. I felt guilty. Stressors from the cognitive domain. I found it hard to concentrate. I could not understand what my colleagues were saying. Stressors from the social domain. My boss's anger or my colleague's opinion. And the stressors from the prosocial domain, being witness of someone else's accident. And now, make a detailed description of this situation. After you do that, try to answer the following questions. What were your stress signals? How did you know that you experienced a high level of tension? What were your biological level stress signals? What were your emotional level stress signals? What emotions were coming up and letting you know that you were experiencing a high level of tension? What were your cognitive stress signals? How did your brain function? And how did you know when you feel a high level of tension? What were your social stress signals? How did you see other people's behavior? What were your thoughts about others, their intentions and their feelings? And what were your prosocial signals of stress? How did you react to other people's problems? How did it make you feel? So please now describe the situation briefly and try to identify stressors and their domains. So what are the stressors from the biological domain? What are the stressors from the emotional domain? What are the stressors from the cognitive domain? What are the stressors from social domain? And finally, from prosocial domain. Now I would like to invite you to the exercise number 3, which is step 3 of the self-regulation method called stress reduction. In the previous steps, we have identified the stress signals and categorized stressors regarding the 5 stress domains. Once we know what our stress signals are and where stressors come from, we can start reducing them. Now, let's try to reconsider our case of stressful situation, looking for ways to reduce stressors. Remember, the ways of reducing stressors have to be considered individually. Yesterday I had just a tough day. I could not sleep well the night before as my little child was sick. When I finally woke up in the morning, I realized I did not hear my alarm clock, so I overslept. It was really late for work and I had an important meeting that I had to attend. So I left home as quickly as possible, even without having my breakfast, and drove fast to work. Of course, I arrived too late. My boss was really angry with me, and I felt guilty, as I really wanted to help my team with the presentation during the meeting. But I was so sleepy and tired that I could not even understand what they were talking about. I felt so guilty. I felt like I disappointed my boss, my team, and myself. All day long, I had a terrible headache. On my way back home, I was a witness of a car accident. I saw a woman crossing a street who was hit by a car. I helped her, of course, and I called an ambulance, but I felt like all my body was shaking. Finally, I arrived home really late, really hungry, tired and irritated. When I entered my home, I could see the chaos and mess around. I suddenly got really angry with my children and my husband and started shouting at them. Stressors we have identified in previous steps. So, the biological domain, I felt sleepy and hungry, I had a headache. Now, in this step, we think, how can I reduce these stressors? For example, I can try to sleep longer if it's possible. I can try to think about day off if we feel really exhausted. Or I can take care of proper meals. Take some breathing exercises to release our headache. Stressors from the emotional domain. I was afraid of my boss's reaction. I felt guilty. What can I do here to reduce the stress? I can talk to my boss and explain the situation. I can talk to my colleagues and explain the situation again. Now, stressors from the cognitive domain. I found it hard to concentrate. I could not understand what my colleagues were saying. How can I reduce it? Well, I can take again some breathing or mindfulness exercises to help my attention focus and work better. Stressors from the social domain. My boss's anger, my colleague's opinion. Here again, I can talk to my boss and explain the situation, and the same with my colleagues. Stressors from prosocial domain. I was a witness of the car accident. How can I reduce the stress? Well, let's try to do some breathing exercises. And now, try to think of any recent situation in which you felt really irritated and tense. Try to remember as many details as you can. For example, what was the place you were in? What were you wearing? What sensation did you feel in your body? Think about all the emotions you felt at the very moment. Try to recall, what did you think about other people? Try to remember your thoughts and whether you were focused or distracted at that moment. Take a moment to remember the situation as clearly as possible. Try to feel it. And now, describe the situation briefly and try to identify stressors and their domains, and then find the ways of reducing specific stressors in the particular domains. For example, stressors from biological domains, what were they and how can you reduce them? Stressors from the emotional domain, what were them and how particularly can you reduce them? The same with the stressors from the cognitive, social and prosocial domain. The next exercise I would like to present to you is the last fifth step of self-regulation strategy, which is a regeneration. The same as with stress signals, the list of relaxation methods has to be considered individually. For one person, the best way of recovering energy will be some sport activity, whereas for the other, this could be reading a book. So, try to think about what are the ways to regenerate for you and what will work for you the best. These may include, for example, relaxation exercises or physical activity, or simply reading your favorite book, newspaper with a cup of coffee. Try to list as many ways as possible. Let's have more than 10. This exercise, of course, we can do in groups. For example, one group will name short-term relaxation strategies, whereas the second group will name long-term relaxation strategies. Then please draw some of your favorite and most effective methods of regeneration. You can use the attached graphics for this exercise. Keep this drawing for you as a source of inspiration so that you can use it in the difficult situation when you need recovery. If you do this exercise with younger children, encourage them to draw activities that make them recover their energy. If you do the exercise in groups, exchange your lists and drawings, then compare the lists and try to find similarities and differences. Do you see the similarities? And if not, what are the differences? Why do you think some points may differ? What is this talking about? Which regeneration methods are repeated here? Which do you find the most effective? What other reflections do you have after doing this exercise? What was a challenge for you while performing that? Share your thoughts with us. Thank you.